Привіт моїм друзям та родині, ласково просимо до Молтенка, що говорить. Я ваша ведуча Marlena. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of The Talking Moltenka. I'm your host Marlena, your second favorite Slavic atheo-pagan on the internet. Today's video I want to talk about a little bit as a follow-up to my last video when I said I should write a book about wands. So I've decided against it, and here's why. Upon research, it seems like a few people already have. And I find that if I were to write a book about wands, it would be self-published. And it really is, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of planning involved in writing a book. And people have to really love it in order for it to really be worthwhile. So not only is the writing process a painstaking process, but you're, applying and for an ISBN, you've got to apply for your creative copyright, maybe permissions if you're using photos from someone else, and footnotes, fact checking, editing, rewriting, cover work, the cover art, everything. Everything is a lot of work. And I know from experience, because I've self-published twice already, and I know, looking at the 3 authors I was looking at that have written books about wands, I find that some people are a little critical. I'll just leave them out of it. If you want to Google books about wands, you can look it up yourself. But I just find that some people reviewing these books have found that there's too much sexualization going on with the mentioning of the wands being masculine, being referred to a penis all the time, and too much of the sexual reference. And also there's writers who weren't so fortunate to be published by Llewellyn, and their book really couldn't get off the ground because there weren't that many readers, not that many reviewers. And then there was someone else that I was reading the reviews, and it just seems like they had good reviews, but it seemed like people that were from within reviewing the book. I have no proof of that, but it seemed like that. I have reason to believe that. Now, good on them for writing books. I figure I'm going to cut the Harry Potter stuff out of this, and I'm just going to talk about the use of the wand. And I don't know if it'll be the final part of my series about wands, but I'm going to focus a little bit on the Slavic path, which I haven't really done before. Now, bear in mind, if you know anything about me, if you've watched any of my other videos, I learned a lot through Western European practice. So I joined people who practiced like Celtic paganism, whatever that would look like. Read books that were, on bookshelves in stores where Western European and Celtic practice was bias. And there wasn't really a whole lot on Slavic practices. And I always felt out of place. I'm not Western European. I'm ethnically Ukrainian, so I have nothing in common with anything Celtic. So when I was part of some groups celebrating doing things and they were Celtic, I thought, I don't know, I don't really feel like this is me. But I make reference to it because that's how I was taught to do things. And I find that through Europe, when people spilled into Europe, when they were first migrating into Europe, they took their pagan practices with them from east going west. So the west was really the last to be populated. So people in the east really were doing it first and doing it longer. But there's really not a lot that people know about. So that's why I'm promoting it. I know that there is a lot of love for Ukraine, especially in the last few years. Well, maybe more than that, maybe more like 10 years. Point is that I'm gonna talk a little bit about how wands were incorporated into some rituals in the Slavic path. But if I make references to the Western European ways, it's out of habit, really. Sorry, but I'll do my best to just keep it focused. So, to start, I am not a professional wand maker. I do this as a hobby, and I have never in my life sold a wand. I've given them away. I don't sell them. I don't even know how much to sell them for. If you look at something like Etsy, let's see here. You can see that some of these are beautiful. But you know, they're ranging in price from like $30, $40, $50, $60. So, yeah, I mean, you can buy a wand. You can buy a beautiful wand. There's no doubt about it. But I do not sell. So I have been approached to sell by a proprietor local to me, and I didn't even know where to begin because, for one, I mean, it hasn't happened. But I said, I don't even really know what I would sell these for. I don't know how much. And secondly, I got to consider the extra income in how I'm going to claim this to CRA at tax time. So even if I make just a little bit, it's still something that I would have to claim. And would I have to fulfill orders is another thing, because if I have to be told that, hey, somebody's looking for a pine wand, can you make it this long and have this design on it or whatever, I may start to resent making them. Like right now, every time I make a wand, it's because I want to make it. And usually I try and do it under a full moon or new moon. So at the moment, every wand that I've made is, it's made because I wanted to make it. Okay, so on our altar, or focus, if you're atheopagan, you call it focus. There's 4 elements on our focus for the Slavic path. So there's air, earth, water, and fire. Okay, we know what those are. We all have that in common. But in Slavic folklore, there's folk magic. There's also a 5th element, which is salt. So traditionally, a corner altar or focus is what's used in Slavic practice. So it's by a door, and you acknowledge it. You can physically acknowledge it on your way out the door when you go to work, and then when you come home, you acknowledge it again. And that's what people used to do back in the day before they would go out into the fields. They would acknowledge their ancestors or anything that they had in their altar at the corner, by the door, and say good morning to it or whatever they would do. Come back after a long day and acknowledge it coming home again. So on the focus, or in the shelf or cabinet or whatever it was, you would have little dishes representing the elements. So there'd be a little dish with water, a little dish with some plant matter representing earth, a little dish with a candle for fire, and then a little dish that was either empty or had incense that would represent air. And then the 5th element to bind them all together would be salt. So there would be the 5th. And that's Slavic. I don't think salt is used in Western European. So over the years, the elements then were given a symbol to represent what they were. So this is where I'm kind of delving into the Western practice now, but just so that you know, because this is where wands come in, okay? So for cups was representing water, because water goes in a cup, right? And then the pentacles or coins, like think of your tarot decks, okay? So a pentacle or coin, that represented your physical world, a world where there was an economy and material things, hence the symbol. And then there were swords or knives to represent air, because a knife, in a practical sense, was to cut and divide. And that is putting thoughts to action. And that would represent your mental state, something you can't see, which is also like air. You can't see it, but it's there. And then there's wands for fire, because wood is the impetus of what you need to make fire, which means fire also resides in the wood. So then we had this apply to us as people. So water represents our senses or our emotions. Earth is to represent our presence in the physical world. Air is for our intellect or mental state. And fire is for rebirth, energy, and action. So the four will all live together in one spot, usually on our altars or focus, and used in our practice. So, and I mentioned that because I have to get to the wand part, right? So why is a wand represented as fire? What does fire mean? So a wand, a fire itself means newfound energy. So if you think about the midway point between the vernal equinox and the summer solstice, that's considered a rebirth with the earth, when things that were planted are growing again and there's flowers blooming, plants are growing. And in Celtic tradition, Beltane, it's also called the fire festival, right? Coming together now. So the word Beltane, the root of that word bel, means to burn or shine or flash like a fire. And what do you use to burn and sustain fire? You use wood. So in the Slavic path, we call it radenica, and the root word is radis, which means joy. And at that time of year, which is the exact same time of year that Beltane takes place, so April 30th, May 1st, the literal translation in our culture is called the Day of Rejoicing. And that's the time of year for a rebirth, where the belief was that we join the living and the dead together as a rebirth. And it was a happy time, hence why we have the word joy in there, radis. So these celebrations were done in the mountains, and it was very common for many pagans across the regions across Europe to celebrate in the mountains, because they felt closer to the gods above. And they would light fires so the gods could see us, but they also lit the fire so that the people, our beloved ancestors below, could find us as well, and their souls could be cleansed through the fire. Now, on a personal note, Walpurgis Nacht, or Walpurgis Night, is the very first pagan celebration that I ever took part in. So basically Beltane, okay, it was in Germany, spring of 1998. It was in the Harz Mountains in Germany. And it seems like celebrating on hilltops or mountains was very common. So like now that I think about it, Harz Mountains, it makes sense, because that's what people did. They went into the mountains to do their celebrating. And at that time, I was not yet focusing on Slavic customs. I wasn't even really thinking about that. I just kind of accidentally found myself doing this. It was on purpose, of course, but it wasn't really until maybe a year later that I started taking part in more pagan practices closer to home. I was only really in the know with Western European pagan customs at that time, because, like I say, the book's written all Celtic, all about Western European. The people I talked to, everything was about Western European. But I will say the one thing is that everything just seemed to be across the board, meaning the same thing. That time of year in Europe, it was about rebirth and energy and that sort of thing. So the association with fire, it just seems like everybody had similar intent across Europe. Plus, I think we Slavs have a bit of fascination with fire, because people would play with it. Like they would jump over the fires. They would set barrels on fire and roll them down the mountains. They'd perform fortune telling in the flames. They would light poles on fire. Fire was fun. Slavs love fire. And now that we understand that the wand is representative of fire, now we can take that meaning into our practice and use it when we're focusing on something like a new project, new relationships, or as a tool to protect the way fire would. And by that I mean like a spiritual protection. So in Slavic customs, fire joined our worlds. Okay, it joined the underworld to our living world with the gods. So it was all connecting. And fire was considered cleansing because when the souls from the underworld came up, their souls were cleansed in the fire. So about 5,000 years ago, in the footprint of land where Ukraine sits today, the original civilization that was there created agriculture, and they would collectively live together in a village. And for some strange reason that archaeologists couldn't figure out, but they would burn their homes down. They'd build these like condo type homes. And then every 20 years or so that they figured from their evidence, they would burn their homes down. And knowing what I've learned about our relationship with fire and cleansing, every 20 years, it almost seemed like it was a way for them to cleanse their homes. So they would cleanse it, burn it down, rebuild. So fire was considered sacred. It wasn't just for keeping us warm. It was actually an element that we played with and we used in spiritual practice. So a wand, as I've mentioned, is a miniature staff. Okay, we've said that enough. It's basically a staff, miniature version that we can use in personal practice or put on our altar or focus. So the staff was a physical aid, it was a weapon, and it was a talking stick. So if you had a staff back in the day, chances are you were older and you needed the help from the physical part of it. But also when you wanted to speak and you had your staff and you tapped it on the ground, it meant you wanted to speak. When people heard that tap, tap sound, they knew the elder wanted to speak and their backs would straighten and they'd listen because it was pretty important. It was considered wonderful to and privileged to be an older person because you had so much wisdom. So when you wanted to speak, it was like, tap, tap, gonna speak now. It was like, okay, what's uncle got to say, So, yeah, they used it as a way to signal that they wanted to speak. So also the staff was a tool to direct. So wherever it was pointed to, naturally someone would, their eyes would go from one place to another because it is a natural thing to use to point to things. So now what was it made of? It was mainly made of wood, but sometimes it was made with some bone. But wood was preferred because you could whittle and carve and shape it the way that you wanted to or whatever size you needed it to. A lot easier than working with something like bone. So staves actually go back way further back in history, way beyond Europe. They were common in Asia. In Asia, they were called a bow staff, so they were used as a weapon. And in Africa, even when we were still humans living in Africa, they were used for the same purpose. They were used as walking sticks. They were used as weapons. So the fire is an element that is used in ways that are very important to our species. We use it to cook. We use it to keep warm. We use it to give us light in the dark days or the dark nights. We use it to satisfy our spiritual purposes. We use it to connect ourselves with the dead and to the gods. And as I was prepping my notes, I was reading some discussions online where people just decidedly changed how they view the elements, and they just decide, I'm swapping them, like just like that. So they decided that a sword should represent fire and the wand should represent air. Like I'm reading this online and I'm like, people are just changing things. That's very funny. I'm all for adapting and evolving, but it just seems like in today's world, anything goes. And some people just dismiss certain traditions and do your own thing. And I guess that's fine to a degree, but I think people should, I don't think they should outright change history. If you want to do something that's a little different, I guess that's up to you. But I mean, history and the reasons why we do the things we do have carried on for thousands of years. So a few people reason that they think swords should be the symbol for fire because they say fire is used to make a sword and wands are waved in the air. So, I mean, okay. Wait a minute. Hold on. What did we do before there was metal? Okay, metal has been around, like this is our modern day brain thinking of things, of what a sword or a knife is, and that's fine. But before the Iron Age, people carved bone and stone and wood and rock and like anything, shells, that kind of thing. And so when they were carving something like a knife, they probably used bone or rock. And this is before people knew anything about forging anything. So remember, paganism goes back tens of thousands of years. So before that, we can't just say to ourselves, oh, blacksmithing, you need fire, and decide that's it. It must mean this. I'm changing everything. And people online are like, yeah, okay, who cares? You do you. Don't listen to anybody. You do what you want. So this is the thing. While this is 2024, I care about history and I enjoy our 2024 privileges. So with that comes inventions, machines, technology, the ability to read, the privilege and ability to get an education, and connecting with others in moments far and wide, and not fearing my life for openly practicing old customs, because just a few hundred years ago, none of that was possible. So today, we see the wand kind of falling out of fashion of what it was. And thanks to Harry Potter, we're seeing it in a completely different way. So again, just reading the comments from people here and there, some people say, oh, you don't need a wand, which you don't. You don't need a wand. Okay, that's fine. But they'll add, it doesn't really work, or it doesn't do anything, which is amusing to me because here we are, the entrance of atheopaganism, talking about what works and what doesn't work, because people think that in order for something to work, you have to believe in it first, and then deciding they don't believe it works and therefore it doesn't work. Okay, so in atheopaganism, or any secular practice, you're performing functions that are stimulating a part of your brain that responds to placebo effects. So when we do them, we'll do them out of habit and or enjoyment, and not really worrying so much whether or not it's working. So it's like having your own personal cure for hiccups. Okay, like if you have the hiccups and your belief is that you have to take a sip of ginger ale or something, and that's just always what you've done, then you're going to do it. It makes, it's up here, it makes you feel better. By the way, the cure for hiccups really is drinking water upside down through a straw. But anyway, it's neither here nor there. You do it because you're satisfying that part of your brain, and that is a form of soothing. So historically, wands in Slavic magic were used. So the wand was used, but also a spindle was used. So women mainly used the spindles. men and women could use a wand. So this is what I know in Slavic practice, is that the wand was used in a very physical way. You touched the wand, you would touch others with it, roll it on the skin. It was very, very much a physical object, tool that you used when you were doing any kind of ritual. Or if you're not comfortable with touching it, you could always just have it by your other tools. That's fine. So what people would do is, it was a way to direct things and protect. So certain woods would do a better job at protecting than other woods. And you would hold the wand in a certain hand, and you could do something like go around your home, and you can put crosses around your doorways and windows. And you could do either a crisscross, like an X, or you can do a T cross or a plus sign kind of cross. So one cross would be one way to keep things out, and then an X cross would be a way to keep good things in. So you could go around the outside of your home or inside of your home, and you would just do crosses all around your home to protect. One or the other, because you wanted good things to stay in and bad things to stay out. So you couldn't go wrong with either way. So the other one was, depending on which way you spun the wand, would do different things. So there was an ascension and descension motion. So you could hold it upright with the big end, with the pointy end down, or you would hold it upright. So depending on which hand you hold it in. I know in Western European practice, the left side is your side that you take in magic, and it's your feminine side, and the right side is masculine, and that's the side you are expelling anything from you, and it's your masculine side. So in Slavic, you would mainly use dominant and your non-dominant hand. So when you were doing something, you would spin clockwise and then counterclockwise for the other way. So when you want something to draw out of you, you would go clockwise going up, and then if you want something to come to you, it would go downward counterclockwise. Okay, so that was the motions and the direction of the wand. It was a very physical object, and you would do that. You could do that anywhere in your home if you're drawing out an illness, or if you're bringing in something good for yourself. You would want to do it in the right direction and go down or go up. Okay. So when women did this with spindles, they would do so with wool still attached to the spindle in some way, and then once the ritual was over, they would discard the wool. Okay, I personally make Slavic, traditional Slavic wands, and what those are is what you see. Actually, I didn't even make this one. My husband made this one. It's my favorite wand. It's red cedar. My husband made this for me. But Slavic wands are natural. They don't have any decoration to them. You could carve into them, but they were made very similarly to a spindle. And a spindle would have some knuckle grooves in them and a little wider, and then they would come in at the ends. And a wand was no different. So, I mean, I don't know how it came to be, but some people began decorating their wands, and some people were, finding wire and crystals, or they would fit pieces of rock crystal shells or something, maybe even gluing into a wand, and that's just not Slavic. So not only do I think a natural wand is incredibly gorgeous just on its own, but that is the traditional way a Slavic wand would be, just wood, no bells or whistles on it. I'm not sure how that happened. I think that in the West, maybe it's even in modern times, I don't know, people started to decorate their wands maybe like a Keeping Up with the Joneses kind of mentality, where they wanted to have a better looking wand and people to be impressed by it. I don't know. But it doesn't work in Slavic folk magic because when you're drawing things out and bringing things in, whatever is on the wand, you would have to discard. So it kind of makes it not really practical. So if you're using something like a spindle and there's, thread or wool on it, you'd have to get rid of it. Just this, that's all you need. So I don't know. I think that part of that might be Harry Potter to blame. I don't know. I know that when I go on Etsy and I look at some wands that are really decorative, to me, some of them are really showy, and I think that they're just meant for decoration. But again, that's not the Slavic way. Yeah, I wouldn't want to discard anything that was really nice on the wand. So if I had fit a crystal onto it, I'd have to take it out and cleanse it. And if something really awful happened, like drawing out an illness or something like that, I would, have to take the crystal and just discard it altogether. And I wouldn't want to do that. By the way, as I've said in my last video, if anything is really, really wrong physically and you need professional help, please seek help from a professional. This is for rituals and like folk magic, folk rituals, and it's not to be replaced by whatever a professional can do for you. So, like I say, when you're atheopagan or you're secular witch, you're doing a lot of these things because they fulfill a part of your brain that feels a little bit better doing them, like your cure for hiccups. May not work, but you do it anyway. So anyway, there you go. If I wrote a book, that's basically all I would write about. I would just say, here you go. This is what we do with our wands. And, you spin them and you actually are physical with them. You touch them on a part of your body, you touch them on somebody else's body, like that kind of thing. I also point them. So if I point them in a direction and just leave them somewhere, whatever I'm doing is also another thing I do. I point it either pointing it east or I'm pointing it west in this direction. But like I say, other people have written books on this. There's a lot of things you could probably pick up online. But like I say, I follow a Slavic path, and that is what I do with my wand. It might be different. You speak with someone else, they do something different. Maybe they follow something else. And also Slavic magic varies from region to region, and I follow the northern Slavic style. And that would be Ukrainian. So there you go. Hope you learned something new. I hope that helps. If you have any questions or comments, of course you can let me know anytime. And we'll see you again on the next video or the next live. I pamiętaj, zробити щось про мене для себе сьогодні, which means, and remember, do something nice for yourself today. Побачимось!